Good day. Welcome to the Leader's Edge. And in our show today, which is Season 6, Episode 7, we have a very special guest. He is Archie P. Inlong. He is a political communications consultant and coach of political aspirants ever since election 1992. And on a personal note, he used to be my boss in the Commercial Bank of Manila a long, long time ago. But ever since then, I've always known Archie to be one of the most sensible, most ethical persons I've ever met. Today, he will be talking about voter power, making right choices for election 2022. Our goal with today's show is to help all voters understand the stakes in the coming elections, to make sense of the huge volume of campaign material currently filling up social media. Our outline for today will be 1. How not to be swayed by political propaganda. 2. How to use the voters' criteria for selecting the right candidate. And 3, how to guide others in doing the same. Not everybody has access to the internet and not everybody will understand what's at stake. So it's part of our task as voters to help those who cannot help themselves. And so tonight, let us all welcome to the virtual stage Archie Inlong. Archie?
How are you doing, Dino?
Fantastic, especially because it's been my dream to have you as a guest for quite some time now.
Thank you.
So Archie, I was wondering, how did your journey begin as a consultant, as a communications consultant? Because that is such a rarefied area of expertise. I mean, not everybody is good enough to help people say the right things, say the right words. How did your journey begin?
Election of 1992. So our country was about to hold the first free presidential election after the EDSA revolution. And I had the privilege of having been invited by two candidates, one running for president and another one running for senator. Now, both had a similar requirement. They said they needed the process and a set of skills to communicate with what they called then as the new audience. So, for the first time, here we were in the presidential election, and the voters were a post martial law audience. They had a different way of thinking. Well, we had new technologies. There were more forms of mass media, and these two candidates felt we needed to make sure that we spoke, communicated, conveyed our messages in a way that the new audience would understand. Uh, Martial law, the very long years during which we had no democratic exercises, eradicated the old mindset and a few generation of voters. So there we were in 1992 with a new set of voters, with a new way of viewing things, with a new way of listening to political personalities. And these two candidates needed to connect to them in a way that was both efficient and effective. So they needed somebody who understood the audience, who also understood the candidate and also understood the process with which to bridge the two, the new voters and the candidates who were also coming from the martial law generation. So that's how I started. So my role was to share with them techniques, principles, framework. I was very process oriented, and I helped them look at their image and give themselves what I call a self-assessment. Determine whether or not this is the way they want to be seen by their audiences, and this is the way they would want to convey their message to the new voter.
Wow. I recall during that time, I was also helping a senatorial candidate as well. and somebody who was running for vice mayor in the Calabarzon area. Um, Mixed feelings about that particular endeavor
Mhm.
because the senatorial candidate did pay a lot but was too busy to attend his coaching sessions. But the vice mayoral candidate was so eager and he barely had any budget. But because he sought me out, he came all the way to my home to ask for my help. And I was so moved by his humility that I went all the way to his hometown and coached him there with only one requirement. Please don't make me put the sticker on the bumper of my car. I want to be able to go home in one piece. And God bless him, he won. I backed him up because I absolutely believed in his platform and what he stood for. And and I just asked one favor of him apart from that sticker thing. I said, I don't really mind that you can't pay me that much, but if you could help introduce me to the businesses in your area, I'd love that. And so it began a long relationship. Archie, I was just wondering, considering that you came from such a communications oriented background, did you always know, so my question really is, when did you realize that communications was your love? Was it in school? Was it when you began to work in the corporate world? How did communications grab you?
My introduction to political communication happened in the streets of Manila. So let me share a funny incident. I was 6 years old. I was 6 years old, and we were living in Sampaloc in Manila. When I was 6 years old, uh, my grandfather brought me to my first political rally. These were the political rallies that were happening at the corner of streets. So there I was at the corner of I de los Reyes Street and P. Paredes Street in Sampaloc, Manila. And there was this. You remember the old style of campaigning? The candidate would mount a wooden stage, big drums, and then the old style loudspeakers. And guess who was the very first political personality I had to listen to? His name was Ernesto Maceda, Ernie Maceda, one of
Oh,
the one of the one of the most refined, the most seasoned political campaign veterans this country ever had. He was the master of the political platform. He was the master of the stage. And I was 6 years old. I was looking at him. He was running for the first time for the position of councilor, 3rd District of Manila. And there was mesmerized by his skill. And I was also looking at the audience, and they were clapping, they were cheering. And so at the age of 6, I asked myself this question: how can this guy who was standing on stage elicit that kind of response from an audience consisting of the great unwashed? And from
mhm.
then on, I was obsessed with finding out how do they do that. So I started to understand the kind of words they were using. So at the age of 6, I started my journey into discovering political rhetoric. I was also fascinated by timing. Ernie Maceda would raise his voice, stop, and the audience would cheer. So I would say, so I was telling myself, there is a certain timing to this. Because when he raised his voice and he paused, everybody cheered and everybody clapped. So I asked myself, how can that sense of timing be developed? And then I looked at the micro expressions. What the face does, where the eyes look, the smile, the frown, and the combination of facial expressions and voice. Wow, those politicians were great teachers. So, ever since then, every time there's a chance to watch a political rally, a politician stand up on stage to deliver a fiery speech, I would be there, regardless of which political party this was, regardless of political affiliations. I would be there to listen and then to look at him and to look at the audience and find out how that particular response could be generated. So, for many generations of politicians, I was watching them do this. up to the present. So I've had encounter with great storytellers. So the politicians who just stood up on the stage and who would tell a story, and people would be in rapt attention, mesmerized, just listening to the tale. I also had fiery orators, the guys who would drive people to tears and to cheers. So I've seen the whole spectrum, including the boring ones, including the guys who really don't have it, okay, including the guys who lull people to sleep even if they had their voices raised. I've seen them all, Dino.
I believe you.
So
And I hear where you're coming from because as a Toastmaster, I had the unique privilege of introducing, for example, Dick Gordon as a guest speaker to one of our conventions,
wow,
as well as Miriam Santiago. And I had a chance to speak with her at length for about 12 to 15 minutes. And
wow.
it was that conversation which led me to vote for her over Ramos years and years ago, and to even volunteer for NAMFREL just to help count the votes. um, and I understand as well the value you place in observing how the audience reacts. I think good communication trainers, coaches, and consultants do that. It's not enough to just look at the speaker, but to see what effect the speaker is having on the audience. I absolutely
Yeah.
love what you said about that because it's true. It's so true. I remember a time I was coaching somebody who was then talking about his friendship with a former president, and the crowd behind me started to murmur. And because I was in communication with him through wireless radio, and he had the headset and the earphone in his ear, I whispered to him, "Please stop referring to your friendship with that person. People back here are already murmuring." And so he quickly changed his line of thought, and the people began to cheer. I said, "That's better." Because when I did my coaching at the time, part of the service I did was to mix with the crowd when they went on the campaign trail and to listen to what was going on and feed him information about how people were reacting. I recall I also said, make sure when you campaign, don't have 100 chairs. If you invite 100 people, have only 50 chairs. And he said, why on earth? Why not? I said, well, it looks better when it looks like there are more people listening to your campaign than to have, say, 50 people show up and you have 100 shares. People will say, oh, pity, nobody really went to his campaign, than to say, wow, look at that, standing room only. Some of them are on trees. And so,
So you discovered the value of optics
yeah.
very early, Dino. Okay, there you go.
But moving forward, you know, now that we're talking about how people react and how people behave based on what they hear, based on what they see, I'd like to touch on one of the first things that we were talking about in terms of our outline for tonight. You know, there is so much political propaganda filling the airwaves, filling the world wide web right now. And a lot of them can be very persuasive. A lot of them can be very, how should I say, polarizing. A lot of them can be very triggering. How should we, as viewers, as voters, react to the sheer volume of political propaganda that's present right now?
So, Dino, a lot of young people, new voters, have been coming to me and asking for guidance on how do we select the best candidate for the 2022 elections. So, the very first thing I ask them to do, so here it is, Dino, turn off the noise. Turn off the noise. So, that's the first important step. Now, interestingly, Dino, this is the exact opposite of what every campaign team is supposed to do: create noise. So you've heard candidates say this to you, Dino. Dino, I'm going to run for this position. It's about time you start making noise. So you've heard that a lot of times. Hey guys, we're not making enough noise. So to the voter who wants to make a good decision, the first very important step is turn off the noise. Stop listening to the noise. Stop listening to the candidates. So a lot of people are baffled by that recommendation. But let me explain how that works. Let me explain how that works. Every candidate would want us to listen to them. Except that they follow a process different from our own sound decision-making process. I'll share with them using a very simple model how those processes work and how they collide, the process of the candidate and the process of the voter. But first, let's get back to turn off the noise. So why should the new voter, the neophyte voter, turn off the noise? This is because step one is listen first to yourself. So this is a very important advice. Don't listen to the candidates, listen first to yourself. And one of the things we need to understand, every candidate wants to make this election about him or her. That's a lie. The election is not about the candidate. The election is about the voter. So, turn off the noise. Stop listening to them. Let's listen to ourselves first. And then as we do, let's realize and appreciate the fact that the election is all about the voter. It's about us. And every candidate knows this. There is only one day in every 3 years that the ordinary Filipino becomes very powerful. And we need to make sure we know how to use that power. And the exercise of that power begins by deliberately turning off the noise. You turn off the noise, you stop listening to them, you become powerful. Now, after the noise has been turned off, we need now to start asking ourselves a series of questions. So, Dino, may I share the questions and how the voter should ask them logically, okay, in sequence? The first question is always this. What's important to me? What's important to my family? That's a valid question. That's a very important question. So let's not listen to them first. Let's ask ourselves first. At this point, what's important to me? What's important to my family? So every Filipino should ask that. What's important to me? What's important to my family? So the next question we ask is, why is this important to me? Now, the second question helps us to understand the concept of voter interest or public interest. Okay? Now, Dino, anything and everything that we would find important to us and to our family would fall into one of 5 categories. So, for all of the new voters and those who would want to review the process of selecting a candidate, understand that there are 5 things, our non-negotiable, our non-compromisables, that we should be very, very clear about. And we should understand which of these 5 are our priority. So, here they are. They all begin with the letter F, so they are very easy to understand. So, the first is our future. Our future. Number 2, our family. Number 3, our funds. Funds, the money with which we use to provide for food for our family's table, and the funds which we use to provide for our family's needs. That's non-compromisable, that's non-negotiable, our ability to generate those funds. The fourth is our foundations. Foundations, Dino, would include what we believe in, values, principles, our creed, and the things that tell us who we are, our culture, our faith, our history, our language, our mores. So they all fall under foundations. That's non-compromisable, that's important to us. We never surrender them. Now, the fifth one, I added to the list when I came across millennials. Now, F number 5 is called fulfillment. Now, my generation, Dino, fulfillment wasn't paramount. But I discovered that for the younger generation, They demand that they be given the opportunity to attain their fullest potential, to become what they have planned to be. That's called fulfillment. Now, all of these five F's, that's the answer to the question, why is this important to me and to my family? Why is it important for me to have a better job? Why is it important for me to be able to expand my enterprise? Why is it very important for me to have education that my children can afford? Because of the five F's. Now, the next question number 3 is, what should the government be doing for me to promote, advance, and protect my interests and that of my family? That's a valid question. That's the job of government, to protect, promote, and secure our interest, the five F's. Okay, so let's ask ourselves, what should government be doing? Well, then you come up with answers like, well, therefore government should be doing everything to put an end to the pandemic. Therefore,
Yeah.
government should be doing everything to create more jobs. Therefore, government should be doing everything to put an end to criminality. I don't know what you will come up with, but the important question is, what do I think government should be doing? So that's question number 3. Now here's question number 4. So this brings us now to the very crucial question. What kind of leadership should government have to be able to do that? Then, only after we have answered those 4 questions do we look at the list of applicants or candidates. So, guys, candidates are applicants. They're applying to us. They're presenting themselves as a possible option and as a possible answer to the 4 questions we asked. So there you go, Dino. And that should happen outside of the din of politics, outside of the noise that politicians create. So step number 1, shut off the noise, stop listening to the politicians, ask ourselves 4 questions. Then, and only then, can we now take a look at who are the applicants. So there you go, Dino.
Thank you so much, Archie. For our viewers, I hope that you do pay attention to these very, very wise words, because although it may have sounded counterintuitive at the start to turn off the noise, but Archie is right. We need to change our mindset. We need to understand that the people who are campaigning right now are campaigning or applying to be of service to us. And so those are very wise words from Archie. Now I was wondering, how do people use what we call voters criteria for selecting the right candidate? I mean, everybody has their choice, for whatever reason. Um, but how should an informed voter uh, pick the right criteria? What would be good criteria to choose?
So let me make a recommendation to our new voters or those who would want to review how they select the candidates. Dino, every candidate that I have worked with, and I'm partly guilty of this, okay? We want our candidates to be perceived in a certain way. There are only 3 ways to present a candidate, Dino. Only 3 ways, if you're part of the campaign team. And validate this with your own observation. Number 1, a candidate would present himself as a superman. Okay? That is why I would say, I have a 35-point agenda. 35-point agenda? You can do that in 3 years or 6 years? And the answer is, I can and I will, because I'm Superman. So some candidates would say, I'm Superman. And we've had presidents who presented themselves as Superman. Okay? Okay. So that's the first thing they would want us to see them as Superman. And then later on, politicians discovered that Filipinos aren't always looking for Superman. Sometimes, or let's just say oftentimes, we're looking for a savior. Okay? So politicians discovered that Filipinos are always looking for a savior, a knight in shining armor, a liberator, a redeemer. We're always in search for that. Somebody who will get us out of our very sad plight. So you would notice politicians would not present themselves as the person, the woman, the Joan of Arc, the guy who would get you out of your oppression, who would lift you up from your sad plight, savior. So here's the third. Again, because politicians are so keen in understanding the psyche of the voters, here's what they do. They present themselves to us as saints. You know, the guy who is near perfect, uh, probably sinless, uh, forgetting that the Immaculate Conception does not apply to them. Okay? But they would present themselves as have never committed an offense, have never violated the law, and somebody who's above reproach, holier than Caesar's wife. So there you go. Superman, Savior, Saint. That's how they want us to see them. That's the presentation. That's always the peg. That's always the peg. Okay? Now, confession time. You and I are partly guilty of that. We presented our candidates that way. There is no other frame. There is no other frame with which to present them to a Filipino voter except a Superman, Saint, and Savior. Now, what about the voter? How then should we look at them? There is only one way to look at a candidate. We should look at them as applicants. Okay? Not a saint, not a savior, not a Superman, but as a simple person who wants a job.
Yeah.
And therefore, we have to use certain parameters. Okay? Now, here's my recommendation. I recommend 3 parameters. Now, I have had initial interaction with millennials very recently, and they would say, and I discovered that the millennials would say, we can make do with just 2. They have a difficulty with the third, and I'll explain later why. But for your generation, Dino, and for my generation, the third means a lot. Okay, so here they are. The first is performance. The second is person or pagkatao. And the third is your political patrons. Okay, so it's good to unearth or to have enough information about the 3. Performance, person, political patrons, or political affiliation. Those are what we call crucial voter information. We need to know that. Interestingly, the candidate would not want us to focus there because they run the risk of falling short. Okay? Or creating suspicions or betraying weaknesses and gaps. So let me share first about performance. So here's what I tell the new voters. So I ask them, it will be up to you to determine what kind of performance would be meaningful to you. So you take a look at what a particular candidate has done in a previous position. This is called relevant performance. Relevant performance. Something that they did in the past that you feel could provide you with a measure or an indicator of how they will perform in the next job that they are applying for. Okay, so 3 dimensions. So I ask the millennials. So what matters to you? Is it okay with you if the performance of this particular candidate simply meets the first D? They're all in D's, so easy to remember. D is deliver. This guy had a certain set of deliverables and he delivered them. Okay, in other words, he met the KPIs. He met the KPIs in his previous position. If he is supposed to construct 100,000 kilometers of new roads, he finished 100,000 kilometers of roads. He delivered. Okay. Now, so I asked them, are you okay? Will that meet your requirement? Performance, delivery. Now, some of them would say, no, because anyone can do that. Therefore, I tell them, you are looking for a higher D. It's called delight. exceeding expectations. So is that the kind of performance you want from a candidate? Is it the kind of, are you looking for a person who, when he or she fills the next job, could give you the confidence that they would delight you, they would exceed expectation? And many of them would say, yes, we're looking for delight, we are not contented with delivery. Now, some of them, including people of my generation, we would look at the third D, disappointments. Did this particular job applicant have a track record of disappointing? Okay, so that would be relevant to us. Well, we would discover that when this person was in this particular position in government, he disappointed constituency. He disappointed the deliverables of his department. He failed to meet them. Then that would matter to us. Therefore, the signal to us is, as far as performance is concerned, we are up for disappointment if this candidate is given the position he is aspiring for in the next election. Now, we cannot expect the campaign team to furnish us with those information. We have to go look for them ourselves. The campaign team would not provide for that because the campaign team is, when it comes to performance, would always present the candidate as Superman.
Right.
Okay? They would bloat figures, they would highlight figures, they would exaggerate figures, they would misinterpret figures. Okay? They would use pie charts, percentage increases, ratios, etc., to prove that the particular candidate had always exceeded expectation. So we have to look for the information ourselves. Now let's go to the second P. Person, pagkatao, pagkatao. Well, there are two indicators. There are two aspects of pagkatao that are very easy to find if this is relevant to the voter. So I recommend the first two. The first is profession. So what is the professional background of this person? What has he done professionally? Because our profession would say a lot about our character. So, lawyer, doctor, agriculturist, economist, that's very important to know. Also, finished a college degree, has a college degree, authentic college degree. So that's part of profession. Has he or she exercised profession? For example, if he or she is a medical doctor, did they practice that profession? If he or she is an economist, did they put their understanding of economics in the private sector or in government? We have to look for that information. Now, Dino, here's the interesting second part of pagkatao or person, the second letter P. The past. The past. What were the relevant aspect of a candidate's past that matters a lot to us? Okay? So, because the past shape the present. The past has a lot to do with who I am today. So my character today, my pagkatao, is largely influenced by the past that I had gone through. So it's good for us to study history. So what were this person involved with? What were this person's pains in the past? What were this person's misadventures in the past? What was this person's purposeful involvements in the past? So, it's up to the voter now what aspect of the past is relevant to him or to her, but it always pays to look at a candidate's past because the past has to do with who I am today and what I will be in the future, how I will handle the future job.
That's
Now,
probably
there's a
why.
third.
Sorry for interrupting. That's
Go
probably
ahead,
why
Dino.
Ted Kennedy was haunted by Chappaquiddick
For
for his
life.
entire career. Yeah, because
Yeah.
of that one incident when his vehicle fell off the bridge, and somebody drowned because of his driving. So
Yeah.
I totally get what you're trying to say. Do
And
go
and
on.
that and that short episode in the past told people what his character was.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he would lose. He would find it. He found it extremely difficult to
Mm.
overcome the issue of character. It isn't so much that he was in a car with a woman who was not his wife and who drowned. It was the reflection on his character. So the past is important. Now there's a third P, but for some this is irrelevant. Okay, uh, parents. So you might want to take a look at sino yung parents, lineage, ancestry. Okay, so that would have to do with a person's with the person's character, who was his or her parents. Now, millennials told me, so here's an interesting conversation with millennials, doesn't matter to them. Okay? So millennials are, when it comes to pagkatao, are more concerned with profession. What profession did he practice? So tinanong ko, why is it that you wouldn't want to fuzz about the other two aspects of pagkatao, the two other pillars of pagkatao? Too much work. Too much work. They don't want to dig up too much into the past. So they say, I'm looking at, they're taking a look at performance, and then when it comes to the second pillar, person, they would be very interested in profession, a little bit of the past. Parents don't matter much. A product of of my direct conversation with them. So here's the third pillar.
You know,
And I just,
if
go
I may
ahead,
do
Tina.
that, Archie, I'd like to validate what you said
Mm-hmm.
by the awful truth that so many of our young people today uh, grew up without complete parents because one of them are either an
Uh-huh.
OFW
Okay.
or a nurse working somewhere, and so
Mm-hmm.
their grandparents had more impact on their lives than their own parents
Yes.
did. And so I get where they're coming from, where
Mm-hmm.
how they turned out today is less to do by with what their parents did or did
That's
not do.
right. That's
So
right.
I understand why that is less value for them than the other criteria.
Mhm.
Do go on.
So that's the second pillar. The third pillar, which mattered and continues to matter a lot to my generation, is political patrons.
Hmm.
Who's behind the candidate? Now, here's a fact, Dino. Every candidate will have to source funds. In fact, in contemporary elections, one of the things I learned, no candidate ever spends his or her own money. Okay, so it appears that among candidates today, you are how do you call that? You defy the mold if you ever spend your own money. No candidate ever spends his own money. That's a good idea to consider. Every candidate has a source of funding for his or her election. It's good to know who.
Yeah.
And then when we know who is funding a certain candidate's elections, then we might know what future pressure could be made to bear on the decisions that this particular candidate uh, would be making if he or she wins the elections. It is expected that the source of the political funding would try to influence decisions. That's a given. They made an investment. They became a stakeholder in this candidate's political prospects. So one of the things I, as my generation would have it, would look for as the source of the political funding, the political patrons. The second aspect in this third pillar called political patrons are the team, the inner circle, who's advising, who are the workhorses, who are the thinkers. Okay, so I would be very interested to know who is the inner circle of a particular candidate, because these are the guys who would probably land a cabinet position, or these are the candidates who would probably be a shadow cabinet, or people who will be whispering into the ears of this candidate when he or she wins and occupies a very influential position. So I would love to know. Not that I would judge them as good or evil. I just want to know what kind of input this guy would be would be receiving from them, and I do know that it would influence a lot the direction of this person's particular governance and leadership method in whatever position he or she wins in an election. So there you go. Performance, person, political patrons. In Filipino, performance, pagkatao, and pangkat, the group behind a particular person's candidacy. Now, all of these we need to know independent of what the candidates tell us. And we need to understand them in the silence of our own, in the silence of our hearts, and as we shut off the noise that every politician would create. These are the three things that a candidate would rather not have us put under a microscope. Okay? Here's a very important advice to our voters. Let us not put candidates on a pedestal. Let's put them under a microscope. That's the way it works. That's how we become powerful. And the first step to becoming powerful voters, shutting off the noise. Okay? Political power is emotion, rhetoric, slogan, symbols. That's how they become powerful. Dito is the technique called the sway. So again, Dino, for all of us to understand, and you know this, we've probably done it, Dino. We don't really court voters. We don't even convince voters. We don't do that. That's too much work. There's an easier way to get votes, and it's easier than courting or convincing. It is called sway.
Yeah.
So it's good to recognize the campaign machinery does not court, does not convince, we sway. Sa Tagalog, Dino, sinisikap naming madala ka, sumabay ka sa agos. Okay? In other words, lose your own independent way of thinking and evaluating. Just join the mob. Okay? And we have a nice term for that. Bandwagon. Bandwagon, that's how we call it. But at the end of the day, it is swaying. Now, guys, when we are being swayed, we're powerless.
Yeah.
Okay? We've lost. We've surrendered the power. Now, what are politicians most afraid of? When we shut off the noise.
You know, I remember a time when I was counseling somebody who was running for concejal. And I said, given your very limited budget, please don't try to feed everybody in the barangay. Your money will not go very far. Look for the influencers. Look for the influence centers, whether that happens to be si Manong na nag-aalaga ng mga manok, but everybody listens to his folksy words of wisdom. If that happens to be all of the presidents of the homeowners associations, they're way fewer than everybody in the barangay, and you can afford to take them to max. Give them the most delicious food, regale them with your stories, and regale them with your achievements. And if you convince them, they'll take care of everyone else. So I totally get what you're saying about the sway. And yeah, I was guilty of that as well.
No,
Years and years.
we are really not confessing to a sin, Dino.
Yeah,
It's just the way things work. That's how it's
that's
done.
true.
So
Mm,
it's good for a voter to understand the campaign process, and it's good to understand what should be the voter process.
mm,
That's the way, those are the way things work. That's how a campaign is done, and that's how the method that you described. That's called the strategic vote strategy, Dino.
yeah.
That's very efficient. That is
Seriously.
very efficient. Okay, but does not empower the voter. Because the moment you win a strategic vote, the manong you described there, he's called a strategic vote. If you get him, he can bring over 5,000, 50,000
Yeah.
to you. So one vote equals a lot. But you see, manong will not convince, will not court voters. He will simply order them or sway them.
Yeah.
But we cannot expect them to present to the prospective voters performance, person, and
Yeah.
political patrons.
And I'd like to encourage the voters, please remember what Archie said. You know, look for the paper trail, find out where the money is coming from, who's backing your candidate. Because long after the elections are over. These will be the people that the candidate will be beholden to and could easily be influenced by. So, one of the things I've been meaning to ask you, Archie, was about something that I read recently, where you beautifully differentiated the definitions of one was platform versus promises. And I love that because when I read that, it just gave me the aha moment that I always relish because it seldom happens these days. And when I read that, I had that aha moment. I was alone in my room, and then when I was reading that, I said, "Whoa, he's right." So maybe for the benefit of our viewers, could you help them understand what is the difference between a platform and promises?
Okay, so Dino, you're probably wondering, why is it that when I enumerated the three P's that should serve as a basis for selecting candidates, I did not have a fourth P called platform?
Yeah.
Why aren't we even telling voters to vote on the basis of a platform? So here's the sad truth, Dino. In Philippine campaign, in political campaigns in the Philippines, a so-called quote-unquote platform is always an afterthought. It's an extra. At the end of the day, there really is no platform. Let's disabuse our minds. Candidates don't have platforms. Now, Dino, I was old enough to remember what a platform really sounded like. There was a time candidates had platforms. And probably, let me see, at least twice in Philippine presidential elections, a candidate might have won on the basis of a platform. But other than that, it was just the Saint, Savior, Superman formula. That's it. That's it. Okay. Now, well, what's a platform really? So, just to give our viewers an idea. Now, for starters, let's understand that everything we hear from a candidate is nothing but a promise. Now, don't be offended by that. Okay? The fact is, it is a candidate's job to promise. After all, there's really nothing a candidate can do but to promise. Okay? Now, the game changer is which promise has sufficient proof that they can be fulfilled. Which promise stands on a solid foundation, has a basis? Which promise has a basis? So that's a good question to ask. Except that we never ask that. We never ask that. You know what we are beholden to, Dino? The unsaid promise. So, Dino, perhaps we should warn our viewers. Okay, there are two types of promises. One is the explicit promise, the one that the candidates said they will do. But here's what's happening in the Philippines, Dino, and I hope you could help me uncover this and share this with our voters. It is called the ascribed promise. Ascribed, ascribed promise. The candidate never said this, but we ascribed it to the candidate. We felt, we thought that this particular candidate stands for this particular promise, but they never said it. And then after this particular candidate has won, we start getting disappointed. We say, hey, where's the promise? And then the candidate comes back to us and said, I never said that. But I thought you did. No, I never said that. No, that's what you stood for, right? No, that's not what I stood for. Okay, well, that's the danger of the so-called ascribed promise. Is it possible that we are making ourselves believe that a particular candidate would be able to do this for us or has actually promised to do this for us, and yet the answer is no, they never did? That's called the danger of the ascribed promise. So let's listen to the explicit promise. What did they really say they would do? Now, every explicit promise needs proof. Now, where's the proof that they can deliver this? Then you go back to the three P's. Can you really do that, Mr. Candidate? Is that an attainable promise? Is it an achievable, deliverable promise? Of course, every candidate would say yes. So we shut off the noise and we go back to the three P's. Based on his past performance, based on the kind of person that he is, based on the people backing him, backing his candidacy, is there a chance that this particular promise that matters much to my interest could be fulfilled? Well, it's for us to judge. Okay? Now, where does the platform come in? Now, the platform is a basis for a promise. But we need to differentiate a platform from what we are hearing today. So, Dino, today candidates rattle off a 32-point agenda, a 22-round platform. Those are not platforms. Those are called programs of action. Now, in what I wrote, Dino, I said, stop reading programs of action. Junk them. They're not reliable. It is so easy to write them down. And when you examine a program of action, Dino, the conclusion you come across is this. Hey, you are enumerating things you're really supposed to do. So, for example, a quote-unquote platform, which is a program of action, would probably say, economic recovery. Hey, that's something you're really supposed to do. That's not a platform. That's part of a terms of reference. That's part of the job description to get the economy recovering. Or, for example, infrastructure development. Hey, every government does infrastructure development. That's not a platform. Okay, that's not a platform. That's something you should really do. That's what you are about to be paid for. Okay. Now, so what does a platform really mean? Well, here's a way to understand what a platform is. First of all, it is short. It is one word, one phrase, or one sentence. Okay. And what does that one word, one sentence, or one phrase tell us? It tells us the game changer that a particular candidate plans to allow us to experience. It's a game changer. It's something different. It will renew or create something new for us in this country. Probably something we have not experienced before, or something we want to experience again. Okay. Now, what are the also a platform is supposed to be something that a candidate survives or drowns with. It's a make or break thing, because people would say, if that's your platform, then that platform is a summary of all of the interests I once served, and therefore I will vote for you because that's your platform. Or we could say, that's not what I want to happen in this country, so I'm not going to vote for you because that's your platform. So what's an example of a platform? Well, the most recent one. Except that this was not the reason why we voted for President Duterte. But he had a clear platform. He said, it's federalism. That's where my candidacy stands. Now, for me, I am sold on the concept and idea of federalism. I believe in federalism. I hate centralized government. So
Yeah.
if that was his platform, I've got his back. Okay, any candidate who stands up and says, one more time, federalism, you've got me, you've got my vote, I've got your back. Okay, because that's a very clear platform. Now, if federalism wins, it already gives us an idea what kind of laws will be made and what will happen to the line departments of the government. Very clear. So that's the other thing that a platform does. It gives us a very clear idea of how the government will run under this particular person. Now here's another very clear platform. Ramos had a very clear platform. He said three things: deregulation, decentralization, devolution. This is the cousin of federalism. Okay? Again, anti-big government, anti-centralized government. Let's do away with Imperial Manila. Let's empower the regions. That's what I love. I love that. Okay? So, Ramos got my back. Okay? I love Miriam. She was my professor. She was my professor in international law. She's my favorite. I love the way she would speak. Now, so that was a case of an election where I decided not to vote for the candidate I like, but I voted for the candidate I needed. I needed somebody who would work for devolution, decentralization, and deregulation. And Ramos, when he won, did that. He deregulated the telecom sector, right? So that means we had more industry players. He deregulated the air industry. He devolved the health services. So that's what a platform does. It tells us exactly how the president will run a country. Now, the third clear example. You were probably not yet born when this happened, Dino. I already was. Carlos P. Garcia. Prior to Carlos P. Garcia's term, the Americans had a stranglehold on this country. Okay, we were an independent country, but the economy was dominated by the Americans. Okay, our what we would eat, what we would get to spend, what we would earn, that's in the hand of the American businessman. So Carlos P. Garcia said, "Filipino first." He promoted a Filipino first policy. He changed laws. He revised the way we do things in this country, and it gave supremacy to the Filipino businessman and to the Filipino producer. So that's a very clear platform. And he probably won on the basis of that platform because Carlos P. Garcia was not a charismatic personality. He was a boring personality. And you know what his favorite sport was? Chess. Chess! Okay? So that tells you, okay, that tells you what kind of personality he had. But he had a very clear policy. Filipino first. So that's a platform. Okay, so there you go, Dino. So, unfortunately, have we heard of a candidate in these elections with a very clear platform? There is none. Later on in the campaign, they would think of one and they would flunk because most likely the platform that they think is a platform is nothing but a program of action. And interestingly, traditional media would and even social media would refer to them as platforms. They are not. So when the candidate says we will bring in more investors, that is not a platform.
That's a
Okay,
promise. Yeah.
that's a plain promise. That's not even a program of action, and that's something that every president should do. Okay,
Yes.
is there a president who would say I would not bring in investors? No, but there is a candidate who would say I would not implement federalism. Okay, so the also platforms draw the clear lines between candidates. So ideally, in a democratic election, the lines are drawn between, for example, between Filipino first and trade liberalization. So lines are clearly drawn there. So you would vote. You can choose between a government that puts the Filipino businessman first, or a president who would say, if I put the businessman first, there would be less foreigners come in and do business here. Very clear lines. Okay? But in today's election, those lines aren't there. There's no platform. Isn't even a program of action. Everything is an afterthought. So, if you would ask me, what have I seen so far amid the noise? Well, again, Dino, it's a reprise of old campaign lines. Here again, another set of Filipinos presenting themselves as Superman, saints, and saviors.
Indeed. One of the great tragedies of our electoral landscape has always been that though we can understand and perceive the nuances that go into politics within our country and even politics that go on in other countries, the vast majority, however, of our countrymen aren't as informed or aren't as willing to investigate, to dig, to find out. Which leads me to my next question, because it's a tough one. How do we guide others, especially the very simple folk, to become discerning, to become willing to ask good questions? There seems to be like blind faith just permeating so many of them. So I'm stymied. How do we guide?
So Dino, here comes now what we learned about how to make the Filipino listen. Okay, so there are fine points, there are skills and processes required to get the Filipino to listen, especially the Filipino voter. So let's begin with what we should not do. Okay, now the Filipino holds so very dear and so very close to his heart his choice. So one of the things I will never do if I want a Filipino voter to make an independent and informed choice is never to attack his choice. Okay.
Right.
So in other words, I would never ask him and who do you plan to vote for? He tells me the name, and then I tell him everything that is so evil and so wrong with the candidate that he has chosen. It will never work. The only thing that does is, you know what the Filipino does when you attack his choice? You simply strengthen his commitment to that choice. Not only to candidates, simple things like choice of car brand, choice of soap. So you would say, what soap do you use? I use this soap. Why? Well, I like the moisture. My gosh, it's pandemic and you're using soap that helps you with moisture. You should buy the soap that helps you kill bacteria. You idiot. Okay. And the Filipino would say, why? Uh, I love my soap, and I think my soap also kills bacteria. Moisture is antibacterial. There you go. You simply strengthen the resolve of that person for a particular choice. So one thing you never do with a Filipino, attack his choice.
Yeah.
Okay? Never. Number two, never present yourself to a Filipino as representing an interest right away. So so this is I'm friends with a lot of financial insurance agents. Okay, a lot of them attend my courses. So here's a joke I say. So when an insurance agent goes to a Filipino and says, "Can I help you with financial planning?" You know what what the Filipino thinks? This isn't really financial planning. This is really a conversation using certain models, and the conclusion is I have to buy his insurance product. Because how dare you pretend to help me plan my finances? You are representing an interest. You're an insurance agent. So parang tayo lang yan, Dino. The solution to every problem is training. Of course. Tell me all the problems of this world, and the only solution is training. Because I'm a trainer. So that's what the Filipino suspects. So if we want to get him to our side, we need to be seen as not representing a clear-cut political party, a political affiliation, or a candidate. Otherwise, we have no credibility. They will accommodate, but we cannot get them to our side. Because we are already viewed with suspicion. We're not there to help. We're there to convert them. Okay? And what the Filipino hates, being converted, being convinced. In fact, in my sales training programs, I warn my participants, the word convince is not a good word in the vocabulary of the Filipino. The Filipino resists being convinced. He doesn't want being convinced. So there you go, the two no-nos. The two no-nos. So, then what can we do? Then I believe, Dino, we should really be authentic and sincere educators. Let's just educate. So how do we educate? First of all, the education process happens with permission. So today, Dino, just last night, I had a free dinner. I had a free dinner with two millennials, a 26-year-old and a 24-year-old. They invited me out. Okay? And I said, why am I getting a free dinner tonight? Because they said, we want to listen to you. Huh? You're investing on an educational evening? So they paid for my dinner. In other words, if there is a level of trust and there is a permission to hear what I have to say, then there is a chance that I can get them enlightened and empowered in their choice. So how did the evening go? I didn't talk about the candidate. I just talked to them about the 3 Ps. So I said, would you like a set of guidelines? Would you like to have a set of parameters with which to make a decision? And they said, yes. May I show you what I use? So there you go. So, Dino, it's the principle of the testimonial. So, I was there credible because I am simply sharing with them a process that I myself use. And at the end of the dinner, they said, wow, we love that. It's so simple. We can use that and we're going to use it. So, how did they get to do that? First, trust, rapport, and the perception that I do not represent a political interest. So we talked to them. I talked to them about performance, person, and political patrons. And we talked a little bit about platform and the absence of it. And at the end of the evening, the conclusion of the two millennials is, "Wow, now we have something to use." So, Dino, it's a very difficult process for me because sometimes I am tempted to manipulate the process and make them a conclusion on behalf of somebody I might favor. But there is the discipline, we have to exercise the discipline of being a guide. So, my role is guide. Now, do you know the first thing I ask them is the same question I shared today. So, guys, for me to be able to guide you, you have to tell me what's important to you at this point.
Yeah.
So, you know what's important to the millennials today, Dino? The ability to dream again. So they said, pandemic, we lost our dreams. We're not even in school. We're having a hard time developing an enterprise. We do not even know if companies will be hiring. Okay. So why is this important to you? Because we want to find out if we have a future. So what kind of government would you need to help you do this? So they had a very clear enumeration. On top of their list, a government that could end the pandemic and reopen the economy. Very clear. So I asked them, therefore, what kind of leader should this particular government have? And so we talked about administration. So ang conclusion nila, we need a president who is an administrator, who understands what are the resources available and how these resources can be best used. So there you go. So now they're starting to look at it more objectively. I told them not to name names. I am not interested in candidates' names. I am interested in descriptions. What should this candidate be able to do? What should these candidates have? And what should this particular candidate which they will choose be? Able to do, have, and be. The basis of that, your 3 Ps. Performance, person, political patrons. So that's how the guiding method works, Dino.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And those are very powerful words because you're right. When you're older and you feel you're wiser, there is such a temptation to tell people what to do and how to do them. And yet all they really ask is all they really need are tools, guidance, and it is
Yes.
our responsibility to guide them, to show them that there are tools that they can use, lenses through which they can view objectively and then make up their own minds. So, Archie, as the months start to unfold before us, because now we're now entering the Christmas season. Well, we're already in the Christmas season. If you go to the malls, Christmas carols are already playing. Um, any words of wisdom finally to the voters that you'd like to share before we end our show tonight?
Yes, Dino. So Christmas season, gift giving, presents. That's what we equate this season with. So, Dino, it would be great if we would give ourselves a gift. So that gift is the next leader,
Mm.
the person who would take on a very powerful office, and that person should be the most qualified applicant for the position.
Mm.
It's good for us to use this season to shut off the political noise. It is good that candidates recognize that at this time of the year, it's good to leave the Filipinos alone. They would not. They would call for a ceasefire during the season, You know that, Dino. In our own campaign involvements, we advise our candidates this is not the time to create destructive political noise. It would offend the Filipino. So this is a great time for us to shut off the noise and to think. Now, at this time, when political noise would subside and we have time to think, let's ask ourselves those four important questions. What's important to me and to my family? So that's what every Filipino should be asking for. This is not selfish. These are realistic questions. Okay? What's important to you and what's important to your family? And then why? What's the interest behind it? And then number three, what kind of government would help us get what we want, get what's important for us and for our family? And then the last question is, what kind of leader should that government have so that that government can give us what's important to us? So let's shut off the noise. And the moment we do, we empower ourselves to make a wise and informed choice decision. My fellow Filipinos, Dino, the moment we shut off the noise, we become powerful.
Oh, it's nice to be powerful, and it's certainly in this time of feeling powerless, that is a strong message of hope that we do have the power within us to make good decisions. And with Christmas approaching, one of the things that I also like is that because of this pandemic and how it has affected us all very, very intensely, there's more a drawing to the real purpose of Christmas, which is to reflect on the birth of our Savior. And so, uh, with that, I'd like to thank Archie and Long for being our wonderful guest and gracing our show today. I'd like to remind the viewers that in season 6, episode 8, we will be listening to Sunny Coloma on the topic of the moving train. And he will be hosted by Sylvia Guliogo, a first time host for the show, but whose father was once upon a time the photographer for the bulletin today. And so, with that, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Leaders Edge, our viewers, and all of our voters out there, I'd like to say thank you so much, Archie. And I do hope that we can invite you into future shows.
My pleasure, Dino.
And guys, always remember that learning is a never ending journey with limitless vistas. Good day.